So, dear friends, we have fallen on hard times. It's a sad time we're living. I do not belong to this age in which I was born. Different age. Have you ever heard anyone uttering these phrases? Probably said some of them yourself. There seems to be an uncommonly common belief that our time is somehow worse, more boring, or more stressful, or less healthy, or whatever, than the other times in human history. And if you think that it's only the old people who do it, well, not quite. And there are too many girls saying that true knights have gone from this world, and too many boys running around in these historical reenactment, reconstruction festivals for this to be true. Young people have this delusion as well. I don't know where it comes from exactly. That's more for the psychologists to discover. But I know one thing, and this idea is wrong. And I will spend the next 2 minutes, allotted to me, by me, to tell you why exactly the time we live in now is the best time ever in human history. We've never had it so good. Now, let's start with stress. All of us have a lot of stress nowadays, right? What with the exchange rates and prices and all that. And a lot of people say, people back then, they knew how to live. They knew how to enjoy the moment. Those were the days. Well, not quite. You know, here, as actually in many other cases, we seem to be confusing the lifestyle of a select minority, of a privileged few, with the lifestyle of the people in general. Because why on earth do you think if you were born 500 or 1,000 years ago, you would be born an idle noble or a lady who can go to balls or enjoy her handiwork at home? Well, not quite. Statistically, it is much more likely you would be born one of the 99% of the countless, silent, faceless majority of peasants who spend their measly lives in dull work from dusk till dawn. And factory workers were not much better off. You know, the first labor protection laws in the 19th century, which limited the working hours per day, so now we have 8. The first number was, anyone? 14. In the 19th century, the workers worked 14 hours a day in a factory. Now you, by contrast, most of you at least, work in a well-lit, air-conditioned office, heated in winter. You have your sick leaves, you have your paid vacations, you have your medical insurance, you have your pension insurance. And you have unbelievable opportunities compared to what people before you had. You can choose who you can be. You get social mobility on an unprecedented level. Even if your parents come from an unprivileged background, you can advance higher. You have choices and opportunities. Maybe some of us don't use them, but we have them like we never had before. Now, some people have the opposite complaint. They say not that life back then was more relaxed, it was more exciting. We had these really romantic times. We had these sword fights and pirates and whatever. Yeah, it was great. Well, again, for some people, a minority, most led rather dull lives, then it was probably not as cool as it sounds in fiction or on screen. You know, the sword fighting, what with the guts spilling out, the blood, the sweat, not very pretty. Even if we assume that this is actually so cool that it's worth living for. For every exciting moment like this, you had to spend in days or weeks in dull nothingness, just doing nothing like riding on a horse in your heavy armor and waiting for the next fight. You had no way out. The cool thing about today, and I don't mind those historical reenactment guys, but the cool thing about them is you can go there, have your romantic adventure, and then go back to your comfortable life. You can be a knight today, you can be a space marine tomorrow, whatever. You get the romance and you get your comfortable life. And this is the first time in history when we, nearly all of us, can do that. Now, some people say that still those were the great times because they brought forward great artistic spirit, great works of art, literature, music, whatever. Well, several points here that I disagree. First of all, I wouldn't say that we don't have any great art today. There is just so much of it. And in a way, it is better than before because you have a greater choice. have a greater opportunity. Maybe some centuries will pass, we will have a new Shakespeare, we will have some new Mozart, recognized by the people after us. Or maybe we won't. And I don't think that is a bad thing. Because again, now we do not need the greats. We do not need some one figure to be religiously worshipped by all. We do not need a Shakespeare. We have dozens of authors for every particular need. And then another important point is that even though there were authors back then, yes, they were great, but in order to enjoy Shakespeare, you had to be able to go to a London theatre. You had to have the money, the social status. Yeah, the Austrian classical music was fabulous, but in order to enjoy it, you had to live in a fancy place which had its own opera house and afford the price of the ticket as much. Today, we have limitless opportunities. This small thing in my pocket gives me access to all of the world's music, all of the world's literature. And I can use it wherever I want. I can choose what I want to hear, what I want to watch, to listen. And we sometimes take a lot of things for granted, and this is one of those things. Because this particular phone is ancient. It's like 3 years old. Yeah. When I was a kid, this was science fiction. Did not have these at all. Never mind 100 years before. This is really great. This is why our time is the most fantastic time ever. Right, you might say the spiritual pursuits are one thing, but at least the ancients, they lived healthily. Yeah, they were closer to the nature. Well, not quite. The single, probably best estimate of healthy life would be the life expectancy. And it has been going up steadily ever since the records began. I mean, before the 20th century, most people could be expected to live like, what, 30, 40 years. I mean, think about the fairy tales. We would have an old man, an old woman, and their baby son. It was not because people put off having babies till a much later age. It was that you were actually old. When your son grew up, you had to die. That was basically it. But now we have much better medicine. I mean, if you go to a hospital now, like 95% of the things they do to you would have been unimaginable just 100 years ago. We have, well, some might say we have all this pollution and stuff, but then again, we tend to underestimate the dangers in the environment that people before us had. I mean, the ancient Romans used leaden pipes to transport water. At some points in history, the radiation treatment and mercury baths were considered viable medical treatments. And then even probably the holy cow of this line of reasoning, that the food was better at least. It is also not without fault. I devoted a whole speech to the question of why natural does not equate good for you. But to give you just one argument why this whole line of reasoning that our ancestors ate healthier than us should be taken with a pinch of salt. Consider just one thing. Food preservation. Right? So if you couldn't refrigerate food, you couldn't use any of the modern methods, you had to do something to get your food fresh for winter. And our ancestors, they did not have all those terrible, E-something chemicals. No, they did not. They used huge quantities of salt. Okay? Putting a lot of salt there so that it's basically swimming. A very healthy option, isn't it? And this actually applies to many different aspects of nutrition. There was vitamin deficiency, even nutritional deficiency. People did not eat enough. So do not tell me that people in other ages ate better than we. So across all areas, medicine, environment, nutrition, we now have a much healthier lifestyle than ever before. And then lastly, the single most important moment, the morals. Because here, a lot of people say, back then the people were somehow nobler. They were somehow better. They just weren't as spoiled as we are now. Again, disagree. Well, first of all, the two major indicators of human morality are the wars and violent crime have been going down steadily ever since. Now is the most peaceful time we have had in written memory.
And the crime rates have been dropping steadily across all countries. And then, even if you say, all right, but look at that on Facebook, you can see those racist comments, that hate speech, you can see people posting drunken pictures, or girls posting vain pictures like this. Come on! People have gone downhill since ages. It has been said so for probably thousands of years. And one thing I can say to this is that this is a question of visibility, not a question of human morals. By the way, the same applies to military conflicts. Because you now can see that a man was killed somewhere in India by an avalanche. Does not mean that people weren't killed by avalanches before. It's just now you can see it. Because 20 years ago, people didn't post drunken pictures of themselves or hateful comments or vain photographs. Doesn't mean they were less hateful or vain or drunk or whatever. And if anything, I believe that now, since we have this high visibility, that means that we can actually address some of those social ills. We can put some sort of peer pressure on them so that we all can become better. We're definitely not less moral than our ancestors, just that we see our ills better. Now, to sum up, one of the points I repeated throughout my today's presentation were choices and opportunities. I want to say once again that today we have much more choices and far greater opportunities than ever before. So I urge you all to use those choices and opportunities and to enjoy this great time that you have been so lucky to be born into.